3 women, 1 house, and not a single sign of struggle. The front door was unlocked, the cars still parked, but the people, gone. It happened in Springfield, Missouri, on a warm June night in 1992. A mother, her daughter and a friend simply vanished between 2 and 7 in the morning, leaving everything behind as if they'd stepped out for a minute and never came back. Police found no fingerprints, no forced entry, and no noise reported by neighbours. For 30 years, the house at 1717 East Delmar Street has stayed quiet, frozen at the exact moment 3 lives disappeared. Was it a kidnapping? A cover-up? Or something no one has ever been able to explain? By the time you finish this video, you'll understand why investigators still call this case the black hole of missing persons. Springfield came alive on the night of June 6, 1992. Graduation meant freedom, and for Stacy McCall and Susie Streeter, it felt like the start of everything they'd been waiting for. Only hours earlier, they had walked across the stage at Kickapoo High School. Cameras went off, families clapped, and it felt like the start of something new. Their friend Michelle Elder hosted one of the last parties they stopped at. Police broke it up around 1:50 in the morning, which was common that night since every graduate seemed to be celebrating somewhere. Susie and Stacy laughed about it as they drove off to another friend's house. They got to Janelle Kirby's house around 2 a.m. It was full of relatives sleeping on couches and floors. There was no space left, not even for a blanket. So they decided to head to Susie's house instead. Susie wanted to show Stacy her new king-sized waterbed. So the 2 friends drove through the quiet streets, one in a Ford Escort and the other following behind in a Toyota Corolla. Back at 1717 East Delmar Street, Cheryl Levitt, Susie's mum, was alone. She had stayed home that evening, turning down a dinner invitation after the graduation ceremony. Around 11:15 p.m, she talked on the phone with her friend Val. She said she was painting and varnishing a chest of drawers for her bedroom. The conversation was casual, nothing unusual. But that was the last time anyone was certain Cheryl was alive. Between about 2:30 in the morning and 7:30, something happened that erased 3 people from that house without a sign of struggle. The next morning, the house at 1717 East Delmar Street looked quiet, almost peaceful. Around 9 that Sunday, Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend Mike Henson pulled up expecting to find Susie and Stacy ready for their trip to Whitewater Amusement Park. From the outside, nothing looked disturbed. No doors had been kicked in and no locks had been broken. But when they stepped closer, one thing stood out. The porch light was broken. The glass cover had shattered across the step, though the bulb still worked. Janelle was barefoot, so Mike swept the glass aside to clear a path. It was a simple, thoughtful act, but police later said that the glass might have held fingerprints or some kind of trace that was lost forever. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air felt still, as if the house had paused. Nothing was broken or out of place. Everything was exactly where it should have been. Every room told a story that ended too soon. Stacy's shorts from the night before were neatly folded. Her purse was stacked on the stairs with the others. Cheryl's was there too, containing nearly $900 in cash from her salon work. No one had touched it. Jewellery and damp makeup wipes were still by the bathroom sink, showing that both girls had washed up for bed. The television in Susie's room was on, showing nothing but static with the sound turned down. Some think one of them lowered the volume after hearing something outside. Nothing about the scene showed panic, yet everything about it said they had no plan to leave. Both Cheryl and Susie smoked constantly, but their cigarettes and lighters were left inside. None of the women's belongings were missing, not their purses, keys or cash. Janelle and her boyfriend eventually called the police, but when Officer Rick Bookout, one of the first responding officers, arrived, the house was already busy. Around 10 to 20 people had come and gone, all trying to help, unaware they were moving through a crime scene. But just when things already felt confusing, something even more disturbing happened. Back when Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend were still inside the house searching for their friends, the phone rang. She answered, and a man's voice on the other end said things that made her stomach turn. It wasn't a wrong number. He spoke in a slow, taunting way, using what she called a sexual innuendo. She hung up right away. Then the phone rang again. It was the same voice, same kind of words. She said later he sounded young, maybe even like a teenager trying to sound older. The timing bothered everyone who learnt about it later. Those calls came the moment people first stepped inside the house. Some think that whoever made them was close enough to see visitors arrive. Others wonder if it was a random prank, a strange coincidence that just happened to fall at the worst time. When Stacey's mum, Janice McCall, came by the house around 7 in the evening, she had already called the police because nothing made sense. When she checked the answering machine, she found a message waiting. She pressed play and heard what she described as a strange message. She never said exactly what it said. It was confusing and made her uneasy. But the second it finished playing, it was gone. Old answering machines erased messages automatically after playback. There was no backup, no copy, no way to recover it. Police were very interested in that call. Springfield Police Detective Alan Neal later said it was a specific message they had wanted to hear. Investigators thought it might have held a key piece of information about what happened inside that house. They didn't believe it was connected to the earlier prank calls, but they never explained why. That left many people wondering if both calls might have come from the same person watching the house. So if the house gave no answers and the calls only raised more questions, what could anyone do next? A city searching. By the time the phone call stopped and the house fell quiet, Springfield was already shifting into panic. What started as a simple missing persons report quickly became one of the biggest searches the city had ever seen. The Springfield police began with a small local effort, but within days, the FBI was on the ground. Retired Sergeant David Asher said they worked day and night, hardly sleeping, trying to find any clue at all. He admitted that his team faced problems they had never seen before. Search dogs followed scent trails that led rescuers to the outskirts of town and then stopped cold. Volunteers joined in, hundreds of them, moving through ditches, riverbanks, and the edges of the Ozarks. They searched the woods near Lake Springfield, checked the James River, and looked through empty lots where old barns used to be. Divers checked ponds and lakes while teams searched fields, trails, and back roads. They covered everything they could, but there was nothing. No clothes, no footprints, not even a tire mark. The city started to feel tense, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. Fear took over daily life. Parents began locking their doors even during the day. The thought that 3 women could disappear from a quiet home without anyone hearing or seeing a thing unsettled the whole town. Janice McCall refused to wait. She turned her fear into movement. She made posters by the thousands, more than 20,000 in total. She called radio stations and television networks, begging for coverage. Within weeks, the faces of Cheryl, Susie, and Stacey were everywhere. The exposure brought in tips from all over the country, but also forced the families to relive their loss on national television. The weeks turned to months, and hope began to fade. By 1997, 5 years after the disappearance, the Levitt and Streeter families faced the hardest decision of all. Cheryl's sister, Deborah Schwartz, began the legal process to have Cheryl and Susie declared dead. It was mostly a formality to settle the estate, but it felt like closing a door they still wanted to keep open. Susie's brother, Bart Streeter, said that day was another kind of loss. His life, he explained, became a nightmare that has not ended, even after 29 years. Deborah said their father never recovered, that the stress and guilt ate away at him until it took his life. But then came one of the strangest leads. Darryl Moore, who was the first assistant in the Greene County Prosecutor's Office at the time, got a strange tip. A psychic claimed the women were buried beneath the parking garage at Cox Hospital. Years later, in 2007, a crime reporter named Kathy Baird hired an engineer to scan the area with ground-penetrating radar. He found 3 anomalies under the concrete that he said were about the size of graves. But the police didn't agree. They pointed out that the garage was built more than a year after the women went missing and said there wasn't enough proof to dig. Many locals still think the site should have been checked, but no excavation ever happened. Once that lead hit a dead end, dark theories started spreading. Some believe the 3 women didn't just vanish. They say they were taken, not by chance or by one person, but through something organised. According to this theory, Springfield in the early 90s sat on a hidden route used for human trafficking. It was seen as the perfect location, connected by interstates that could move people across Missouri within hours. Those who share this view think that explains why there were no signs of struggle, no blood, and no broken locks. Whoever entered that house seemed to know how to take people quickly and quietly. They believed the women were alive when they were taken and that the whole thing was planned. In their opinion, the case never pointed to one violent act inside the home, but to a larger network that kept them from ever being found. It was later found that there had been several coded letters from prisoners who claimed to know something. These contained strange symbols and phrases that sounded more like riddles than real information. One inmate wrote that the three sleep near the water but not under it. Another sent a hand-drawn map with a circle marked outside Springfield. Some believe these clues point to a trafficking group that used warehouses as temporary holding spots before moving people out of state. Fine, not all the letters were considered reliable. Some inmates likely made up stories for attention, or favours, but a few caught more attention, especially one from Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper serving time in a Texas prison. Cox told a reporter that he knew the women were dead and buried near Springfield. He never shared more, almost teasing those who wanted answers. Some think Cox only wanted control, another way to keep power. Still, others believe there might be a small piece of truth in what he said. Supporters of this theory also point to another case from the same area that raised similar questions. In June 1985, 7 years before the Springfield Three disappeared, 20-year-old pageant queen Jackie Johns from nearby Nixa went missing. Her car was found at a gas station, with her blood-stained clothes in the back seat, and her body was later discovered at Lake Springfield. At the time, DNA testing was not available, and the case went cold, just like these three missing. But that theory about trafficking wasn't the only one people talked about. The next one took things somewhere darker. Some stories begin as whispers, and stay that way for years. This one starts with a rumour about people who claim to have escaped from a cult hidden deep in the Missouri woods. They said the group gathered somewhere near the Mark Twain Forest, a vast area of hills and caves where someone could disappear without a trace. According to the story, Stacy, Cheryl, and Susie were taken there for a ritual. Larry Dwayne Hall, a serial offender suspected of killing people across several states, told an author that he had buried 5 victims in the Mark Twain Forest. When asked for details, he said 3 were from Springfield. He gave no names, but the implication was clear. The idea that the women's remains might lie hidden in those woods gave this theory new weight. Some connect this story to earlier psychic tips that reached police during the first days of the investigation. One person, who claimed their visions revealed the truth, said the abduction was a revenge act and that 2 people in a beige van took the women at gunpoint around 3:40 in the morning. They described the weapon, the hair colour of one suspect, and even the direction the van supposedly went. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, passed that message to detectives, as she did with every lead that came in. Hundreds of calls, letters, and supposed psychic revelations filled the case files that summer. Most led nowhere, but each added another strange layer to the story. Locals near the Ozarks say the forest can hide anything. Just a short drive from Springfield are places where trees grow thick, and the ground drops into deep shafts from old lead and zinc mines. Some believe these sites could have been used to hide bodies or evidence, and that whoever took the women knew the terrain well enough to make sure nothing was ever found. But while some searched the forests, others started looking inside the very system meant to solve the case. The cover-up theory. Another theory claims that a document was erased and that the missing record could have shown a government vehicle parked near 1717 East Delmar Street on the night the women disappeared. The theory built around this claim is that law enforcement may have been involved in what happened or, at the very least, moved fast to control the story, once they realised what had gone wrong. Critics say the investigation was already full of problems. Friends and family had walked through the house before it was sealed, wiping away possible evidence. The broken porch light glass had been swept up and thrown out. The mysterious answering machine message had been erased before officers heard it. Every one of those moments became part of the argument that the truth had been lost, or maybe hidden. People who worked the case later admitted there were deep cracks inside the department itself. Greene County prosecutor Darrell Moore called it the most micromanaged case he had ever seen. Detectives complained they were told what they could and couldn't investigate. Chief Terry Knowles, who led the police at the time, was accused of controlling every move, often overruling experienced investigators. Some think that level of control wasn't just about organisation, it might have been about keeping certain names out of the reports. Supporters of this theory often point to another example of what they see as selective silence. Years after the disappearance, when private researchers used ground-penetrating radar at the Cox Hospital parking garage and found 3 body-sized anomalies beneath the concrete, the police refused to allow digging. Reporters even offered to fund a small core sample, but the department said there was not enough evidence to justify it. That refusal, combined with the erased record and the department's insistence that all information go through official channels, convinced many that the case had been silenced from the inside. But what if the real clue wasn't in an erased document, but in the air that night? Locals still talk about the night the air felt strange on Delmar Street. Lights flickered in nearby homes. Porch bulbs dimmed and brightened again. A few people even said their radios crackled with static that wouldn't go away. For some, it felt like the whole block had short-circuited in a single breath. Inside the house, police found the television still on with a low hum. It looked like a movie had finished, leaving only static on the screen. Some said Susie Streeter often fell asleep watching movies, so it might not have meant anything. Still, others found it hard to ignore that the screen kept playing, even though no one was there. Folklorists studying old Ozark tales call these places vanishing spots. They're described as quiet zones, where sound seems to fade and memory turns thin, like fog. The Ozarks have always been full of stories like this, of people walking into the woods or down an old trail and never coming back. Generations of locals whispered about strange hollows and bluffs where the air felt heavy. Places that swallowed noise, light, and sometimes people. These disappearances often happen around the same ridges, near fault lines, or along river bends where old settlements once stood. Locals used to see those places as either sacred or unsafe, depending on who you asked. So it makes some wonder if what happened that night in Springfield connects to something older, something that existed long before police tape and search teams. Even today, neighbours remember how the house stayed quiet that morning. No barking dogs, no screams, just that strange, steady buzz from the television, filling a room that should have been full of life. Some people think it was a coincidence. Others think it was a signal that something unseen had moved through the house and left nothing behind but static. When people talk about the Springfield 3, one question always comes up. Has anything like this ever happened before? And strangely, the answer is yes. There are other stories that sound eerily similar, where people vanish into thin air, leaving everything behind like they plan to come right back. One of the best known is the Fort Worth Trio. It was 2 weeks before Christmas in 1974, in Texas. 3 girls, Rachel Trelica, who was 17, Renee Wilson, who was 14, and Julie Mosley, who was only 9, went Christmas shopping at the Seminary South Mall. They told their families they'd be home in a few hours, but they never came back. Rachel's car was found parked right outside the mall. The doors weren't locked. The keys were still sitting in the ignition, and shopping bags were neatly placed on the seat. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, only silence. Detectives searched every store in the mall. Helicopters scanned the parking lots. Hundreds of people were interviewed, but there was nothing to follow. A single letter arrived later, signed with Rachel's name, saying the girls had run away. But handwriting experts said it didn't match. 50 years later, the families are still waiting. Then there's the Yuba County 5, a mystery so strange that people started calling it America's Dyatlov Pass. If you've never heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident, don't worry. I'll link a video at the end so you can see why the comparison makes sense. This one began in February 1978. 5 friends, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Wire, Gary Mathias and Jack Madruga, drove from their California hometown to watch a basketball game. They stopped afterwards for snacks and then vanished. Their car was found the next day, parked on a lonely mountain road in Plumas National Forest. It wasn't stuck or broken. The keys were gone, but the gas tank was half full. Inside were food wrappers, maps and a basketball program. Everything just left as it was. Months later, hikers discovered 4 of the men in the surrounding mountains. One was in a trailer stocked with food that could have lasted all 5 weeks. But the cans were unopened and the blankets untouched. Their shoes had been removed, and no one knows why they wandered nearly 20 miles from their car into deep snow. Gary Mathias, the 5th man, was never found. Criminologists and cold case experts, including Dr. Michael Arntfield, have studied these cases for years. He says what ties them together isn't just how the people disappeared, but how completely normal everything looked right before it happened. There's no warning, no obvious danger. One moment they're running errands or driving home, and the next it's like they've been erased. The Fort Worth Trio, the Yuba County 5, the Springfield 3. Different times, different places, but the same haunting pattern. Ordinary people, everyday routines, and a sudden, impossible silence. It's what makes these cases so chilling. Not what we know, but what we never find. But theories and comparisons can only go so far. At some point we have to look at what the investigators actually found. Or maybe what they missed. When detectives talk about the Springfield 3 case, they keep returning to one word: contamination. That single problem can change everything. If a scene is not secured right away, the most useful evidence can be lost. Edmund Locard, the early forensic pioneer, gave us a rule that still matters. He said every time two things touch, they exchange stuff. Fibres, skin cells, dirt. That idea explains why securing a scene fast is so important. If strangers walk through a house, they pick up and leave traces. Those traces make it harder to know what came from a suspect and what came from someone who was just passing through. A second idea is the chain of custody. The FBI and crime labs treat this as a strict rule. Each piece of evidence must be tracked. Who found it? Who bagged it? Who touched it? If those steps are missing, the evidence can be challenged in court. In many cases, the defense will say the evidence could have been planted or mixed up. That weakens the whole investigation. The house at 1717 East Delmar Street was not treated like a controlled crime scene in the first hours. Neighbours, friends, and even some reporters went in and out. Officers later wrote that items were moved and doors were opened before evidence technicians arrived. That is the kind of detail that forensic experts warn against. Dr. Henry Lee is a name people in forensics respect. He has often said small mistakes at the start are the ones you cannot fix later. He uses simple examples. If you do not photograph the scene before you touch anything, you will lose context. If you do not collect trace fibres right away, they will fall away or be contaminated by other sources. That is not speculation. That is standard forensics training. Another reality is how fast technology has changed. DNA testing was available in 1992, but it was still new for many labs. Short tandem repeat profiling became common only later. Kary Mullis developed PCR, which made it possible to amplify tiny amounts of DNA. But back then, labs handled samples differently. Some items were not tested because the tests were expensive, or not routine. That matters because a swab taken later might have been less useful than one taken immediately. Detectives also explain how rumours can turn into facts. It happens like this. Someone whispers a detail, a neighbour repeats it, a reporter publishes it. Over time, the story becomes louder and more specific. If you hear a rumour about a phone call, you might later think you remember the call. That creates false confidence. Also, there's the idea that investigators just want to close cases. If an early lead seems to fit a simple story, people can latch onto it. That is confirmation bias. It makes investigators and the public notice details that support the favourite idea and ignore others. Although many investigators say the mistakes were not malicious, they describe them as messy, human errors. Sometimes they had too few staff. Sometimes the job was overwhelming. In smaller towns, the local force is not always ready for a major missing persons investigation at midnight on a weekend. That lack of readiness can look like a cover-up, but many argue readiness is not the same as intent. So while investigators defend their work, others point to details that just don't seem possible. The narrow timeline. There are also a few solid counter-arguments against the idea that the girls were abducted. Let's start with the last confirmed moment. Around 2:15 a.m, the girls leave their friend's house and drive toward East Delmar Street. By 2:30 a.m, they've likely arrived home. The next activity inside was makeup removed and clothes folded. That places the window of disappearance before sunrise, at most 5 hours. Some point out that in cases involving multiple victims, noise and resistance are almost impossible to avoid. Even professional abductors leave traces. Furniture shifts. Neighbours hear footsteps, muffled voices, maybe even a door slam. Yet at 1717 East Delmar Street, there was nothing. No drag marks, no forced entry, no reports of cries for help. For a person or group to remove 3 adults quietly, without waking the neighbours or the small dog inside, would require a level of control that doesn't match any known abduction model. Moving 3 people who together weighed about 400 pounds would take time. Loading them into a car means doors opening, feet on gravel, and at least a few minutes outside. The street was a narrow, well-lit residential road. If they left after 2:30 a.m. and friends arrived by 9 a.m, the window is too small for a clean, unnoticed removal. Planning, carrying out and covering up a triple disappearance in that span would need careful preparation and coordination that the scene does not show. Many believe something else must have happened, though what that was, no one can say for sure. Detectives have retired, neighbours have moved, but Springfield never really let it go. Even now, locals still bring it up in conversations. Sometimes when driving past East Delmar Street, sometimes when a new case makes the news. Every theory sounds reasonable until you look closer. The idea of a kidnapping falls apart because there's no struggle. The thought of them leaving on their own doesn't fit with the things they left behind. Even the chance of an accident somewhere else can't explain why no trace ever surfaced. Each time a theory makes sense, a small detail pulls it apart again. Maybe that's why people can't stop coming back to it. Logic covers most of the ground, but not all of it. What's left is a silence that feels too perfect, too clean. And that emptiness is what keeps the story alive. It's a quiet reminder that even in a normal house, on an ordinary night, something can happen that no one can ever fully explain. Here's the video on the Diet Loft Pass incident I mentioned earlier. It's another mystery that'll leave you questioning everything.